It's funny. We've heard like a ton of bitching about this NBA playoffs and how it was boring and the Celtics were boring and they walked through everybody and there was nothing exciting about the finals, 5-game series, couple of blowouts in there, right? And it's like just a way for other NBA fans to just dunk on the fact that the Celtics won in a boring year. But for some sports fans, it was legitimately like not exciting. And I get that. What I would say to you is there is a really exciting sports thing happening right in front of us as we speak. Because the Florida Panthers have now had 2 shots to close out the Stanley Cup with a 3-0 lead. Same script it looked like as the NBA Finals. And they have not been able to do it. And now we are going back to Edmonton for a Game 6 and one of the most raucous home crowds you can probably ever think to imagine is going to be there, even with the ticket prices as high as they are. This is going to be an absolute cauldron at Rogers Place in Edmonton. These people, they need this, okay? Not to shit on Edmonton too hard, but these people need this, right? This is what they have. They have the oil. And finally, they are in a position to really shock the sports world. And the reason why is Connor McDavid. I mean, it's almost NBA storyline of, hey, we need the best player to play the best when the games are the biggest. It's all about this one player or these 2 players, and that's not the case in the NHL. It rarely is. And when it is the case, you are talking about the very, very best, right? Bobby Orr, 2 Conn Smythe Trophy wins as the playoff MVP with 2 Bruins Stanley Cups. Obviously, Gretzky with his 4 with the Oilers. Lemieux, back-to-back with the Penguins in 91 and 92. Those guys are the ones that you think, okay, yeah, those ones dominated. But if you look at, some of the other recent Stanley Cup winners, it's not guys who are in like the top 5 players of all time, the way it's or top 10 or 15, the way it seems to be for the NBA every year. Connor McDavid is breaking that mold. Usually when one player is dominating a postseason, it is a goaltender. That's not the case right now. And we are legitimately looking at a case where Connor McDavid could be the Conn Smythe Trophy winner as the playoffs MVP in a losing effort. We are in that territory. If the Oilers lose, especially in 7, then you could make a real strong case for Connor McDavid to still win the Conn Smythe Trophy. It'll be the first time since 2003 that a loser has won it. It's happened a few times in the NHL, but it's pretty rare, and it almost exclusively happens with a goalie. And what's even more crazy about this, before we look at the McDavid numbers here, is if I had told you a week ago that it was going to be anyone but Sergei Bobrovsky, you would have had me committed, man. Bobrovsky was in the stretch of having one of the best postseasons ever by a goalie. It was 12 straight games or whatever it was where he allowed less than 2 goals or 2 goals or less. Like video game stuff, Hall of Fame stuff. Finally, he was going to, as great as he's been as a goalie, especially in the postseason over his career, he was finally going to carry a team to the Stanley Cup until he fell apart. He's pulled in Game 4. Oil went 8-1. He wasn't very sharp again in the game 5 back in Florida. I mean, McDavid scores 2. One of them is like the Pat Kane special in 2010. I mean, odd angle at the goal line, just threw it at the net. Somehow Bobrovsky lets that in the net. It's just nuts to think about the run that he was having and that McDavid has kind of stolen that spotlight away from him. For as much maligned as he was through the first 3 games of this series, McDavid I'm talking about, when his team was down 3-0, and honestly, he wasn't playing that poorly. He has been that good in the second half of this series. He is the first player in the history of the Stanley Cup Final to have back-to-back 4-point games. Think about that. You know, we talk about it in other sports, these guys who do it when the chips are down and the brakes are beating them and they need to come up big in clutch situations, and we almost move the goalposts so that they look better in clutch situations. Well, here it is. His team was down 3-0. And all he does is make Stanley Cup Final history with 8 points in 2 games. He was incredible in Florida in Game 5. Like, so much better than everyone else on the ice. You remember that video I did a few weeks ago of how much better he is than his peers? That was it on full display. Okay? Throws in the Patrick Kane goal. They're up 3-0 in the game. Florida gets some momentum back by cutting into it 3-1. Edmonton goes on the power play, a power play that has sucked in this final, and McDavid does McDavid things. He skates through 4 guys and lays a pass on the tape for Corey Perry, the probably future Hall of Famer, to score his first goal of the postseason. Wow. Yeah, teammates get better playing with Connor McDavid. That was a prime example of it last night. He is I've never seen this. If Edmonton goes on to win this series, they will have won it because Connor McDavid pulled them up by their bootstraps. Not a goalie, which is what usually happens, but a forward. This is not like basketball. It's not like he's out there the whole 60 minutes. He does line changes, you know, and it's not like basketball where you can ISO create your own shot and score. Only maybe McDavid can do that. He has just carried this team. It's like heroic to watch. And this Game 5 was a classic because Edmonton goes up that 4-1, and then Florida kind of wakes up. Oliver Ekman-Larsson scores twice. It's 4-3. They're putting on a ton of pressure with the goal he pulled, and it looked like we were going to get an all-time great finish. Florida pulls the goalie with a little less than 3 minutes left, and Edmonton has a couple of shots at it, man. They come down. They beat a cat on the foot race there. Shot going towards the empty net, hits the post, and then skates or just slips right under the guy's stick for what would have been an empty net or put the game away. Here comes Florida again. Edmonton clears the zone again. Shot once again, just gliding towards this empty net. And Matthew Tkachuk with one of the best plays I've ever seen. Full extension, still has the strength at the end of a game to use everything he's got. Full extension with the stick, clear it off the goal line. It would have been a play that would have lived in Stanley Cup Final lore had the Panthers gone down and scored. But unfortunately for them, Edmonton puts it on ice like 2 seconds later. Tkachuk bats it out. It gets not quite to the face-off dot. Who's there but Connor McDavid just put it in the empty net, and we are going back to Edmonton. You could take that, whatever it was, 2,500-mile flight, the furthest distance between two teams ever in a Stanley Cup Final, and we are going to have a Game 6. And honestly, from there, I think we're going to have a Game 7. I know home ice is not what it was even a couple of years ago, but I think that's different in Edmonton. With the momentum they've got going, they have certainly gotten inside Bobrovsky's head, unlike anyone has been able to do this season. They have figured him out and rattled him. I think we got 7. And by the way, McDavid, 8 goals and 34 assists and a +11 in this playoff. 42 points. The only people to score more points in a postseason than Connor McDavid are Wayne Gretzky and Mario Lemieux. You might have heard of them. When you're in that company, we are talking about greatest runs of all time kind of stuff. He's 5 points behind Gretzky for the all-time single postseason points record. And, he can get there. If they force this to a Game 7 and you give me 2 more games of Connor McDavid, he could get there, tie or take that. That's a big ask. 6 points in 2 games at the end of a Stanley Cup Final, but he just did 8 points in 2 games. So it's not impossible. We are looking at one of the greatest single-season, postseason stretches in the history of any sport. We're looking at it. It's happening live right in front of us. And if they lose, does it get knocked down a couple pegs from what it would be if they won? Yes. But nonetheless, we are looking at one of the all-time great stretches right now by a guy who they were asking if he could do it in the postseason. And does Edmonton have enough around him? Do they have enough around most guys to win a Stanley Cup? No, they don't. I think Florida's a better team, and they are a deeper team. But, again, sounding like the NBA, the Oilers have Connor McDavid, and the other team doesn't. And usually that's not enough of a factor in the NHL. Right now it is. And boy, is it great cinema. As bad as you might have thought the NBA Finals were, that's how good this Stanley Cup Final is. Give me 7 games. Give me a 3-0 comeback, which hasn't happened in the Stanley Cup Final in 80 years. Give me 4 straight from the Oil and one of the most iconic Stanley Cups, one of the most iconic championships ever. That's what's on the line here. And like no one outside of Calgary and Miami actually wants to see the Panthers win this thing. Look, they're a really good team. They're a great team. They probably deserve to win it if you look at their roster and how they play. But I think the whole world, essentially, is going to be loyal to the Oil. Let's push this to Game 7. Connor McDavid, you are beautiful, man.
We are Rogue Media Sports.